To what extent can you have the courage to listen to your intuition and follow your heart?
I talk about cutting things out that no longer serve you.
And there's no such thing as fearlessness, because every human being has fear. It's deeply wired in our system.
Right. You're giving listeners the permission to explore other things. Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. Today's guest is Julian Pistone, a former Google leader and global voice on courageous leadership in the age of AI and uncertainty. With 2 decades of international experience, Julian equips leaders at the highest levels to turn volatility into growth, grounded in the belief that the greatest risk today is not technology, but hesitation. He's the co-founder of Courage, a global impact network, and the creator of a documentary series sharing powerful stories of resilience and purpose. Julian's work challenges leaders to act with courage when certainty is unavailable, because in exponential times, those who move define the future. Julian, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so excited. Thank you, Erin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Same.
Yeah.
We've been planning this for a while, so.
We have. I know. I'm so glad we got it booked in before year end. Here we are on, end of December. Well, mid-December, I should say. The moment that Craig and I met you, we just felt so aligned, even just reading through some of your content online and then moving into a conversation on Zoom. We just feel very aligned with the things that you're doing and that we're doing. And the fact that, we need more people on this planet doing this courageous work, the work in leadership, the work in helping people understand how to move through uncertainty and ambiguity. And I think we can all say that our world is full of that right now. So what I would love to start with is that, so much of your thought leadership and your business is around courage. And I'm just curious, how do you define courage? I think it could be pretty vast. So tell us how you define that.
I would define it probably very similar to the way Maya Angelou had defined it. And she said that it's the most important virtue out of all of them, because it underpins all the remaining virtues. I would add to that courage is not a lack of fear. But at the core of its definition lies the willingness to act despite fear and with a noble purpose. That's the definition that I would offer you today. Yeah.
I love that. And, so important that you said it's not to not have fear, but it's, in my eyes, in my own perspective, and it sounds like we're very much aligned, which does not surprise me. It's about facing fear, right? Looking at it head on and acting anyways, which is not easy.
Which is not easy. Courage isn't easy. And I think most people get it wrong. Most people, and here I would ask, how as a child, how was the topic of fear being discussed at home? In my case, boys didn't cry and boys didn't have fear, and there was no such thing as vulnerability. That was way before Brené Brown became big. And so many of us grew up with this belief that being brave means a total absence of fear. And therefore we start projecting this idea of these fearless leaders that we see, that we look up to.
Right.
And there's no such thing as fearlessness, because every human being has fear. It's deeply wired in our system, in our brains and bodies. And those, when I realized, wow, it's actually not about not having fear. It's not about pushing fear down the carpet, but it's actually about, as you said, facing it. You can also embrace it and then acting despite of that. For me, that was very empowering.
Absolutely.
Very empowering. Yeah.
So where would you say that this concept of courage really originated for you? And how did you really start to act upon being more courageous in your own life?
Very early on, I was a very mischievous, curious, adventurous child. very mischievous. And I left home when I was 17 with the blessing of my parents. I didn't run away from home to go and study in this incredible town called Leeds in England.
Mm-hmm.
And for the sole reason that Leeds at the time was the capital of electronic music.
Mm.
So that was the number one reason why I went to Leeds and studied.
Oh, so
And,
we have a love of EDM together too, huh?
So we'll have to debate on that. I'm more in the techno house music part, but I'm joking. And whether electronic music is connected to courage, I don't know. But leaving home is courage, and we often think of courage as this big heroic act, like saving someone or going through a major life change, and sometimes it's the things that happened in the past that we don't even realize were courageous. So I think that's where it started, and it hasn't stopped since. There were definitely moments in my life where more adversity came into play, and where stepping up with more intention became more of a role than going clubbing in Northern England, for sure. But I'd say, that's where it started. It never finished. And I think most people listening to this, they will realize that they've been courageous many times before. It just continues. It continues. Yeah.
Right. And it takes courage to leave a place like Google, right? And I know, you and I have talked before, and I too left Goldman Sachs and then CBRE. So these big, Fortune 140 companies. And it takes a lot of courage to step into doing something different that is not necessarily, the societal norm. So, how did you decide to move on from Google?
I'd say it was a process. Maybe for context, I got very sick in 2018. I was at Google. It was at the peak of my mischievousness. There was a lot of overworking. There was a lot of overpartying. And I got sick with a spine illness. I was on medical leave for 2 years. I faced 3 spine surgeries that led to another illness called ME/CFS. So I was on medical leave for about 2 years. And then coming out of that, you start seeing life and work from a different angle. I started more and more questioning what that ladder was that I was trying to climb inside. For me, it was inside Google, and why. And it became very clear that there was something that was calling me beyond the corporate life. By the way, I'm extremely grateful to Google. I stayed another 3 years after the illness. I wouldn't be who I am and where I am if it wasn't for my corporate career. But that question kept staying, like, why do you, what's behind you, that craving for validation, admiration, success. So that was one big trigger. And then years later, I was close to burnout again. And I was like, whoa, like why, and how did you get yourself again into the same position? Because burnout wasn't comparable to the illnesses I went through before, but my body was very clearly giving me signs. And interestingly, at the same time, I met one of my now co-founders in the middle of the jungle in Colombia. And still to this day, he says that I looked absolutely miserable. And he loves rubbing that into my face. And we started speaking, we started dreaming up what then became a global impact network and a retreat series. And I told him within 24 hours of meeting him, I said, give me 1 year, I'm going to resign. And you and I are going to start a project on courage. And that's what happened. That's what happened. Yeah, I resigned after 6 months. And going back to your question, there was a very strong pull when I met him that I realized if I don't jump onto this train, I'm going to regret this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you don't want to wake up at one point in your late 50s and wonder what if. So at some point, you got to either dive in or deal with regret, right?
Or even later. I mean, most people realize on the point of death.
Yeah.
It's the
Looking
most
back.
common regret.
Yeah.
Looking back. Yeah. And then it's too late. Late 50s, you can still make definitely a few big major changes.
Right.
But when you're
Still
on your
some
deathbed,
reinventions. Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we don't get to choose when that is either, right? Which makes it even more important to have the courage to leap. Yeah. And it's not just about leaving a company and starting your own thing, because that's not for everybody. As any entrepreneur knows, it's very hard, to run your own thing and to build a business. And a lot of times it's even just having the courage to be authentic or to take care of yourself in a way that maybe you haven't before, but have always wanted to, or having the courage to use your voice within, the corporate setting or the business world that you're a part of. Like there's all these different ways that it shows up. And what I'm curious in asking you about is, when I think about things like courage and intuition, I feel like there's a very unique relationship between the two of those. And in my perspective, I feel strongly that intuition really fuels courage, because being intuitive helps you understand or have a knowing of what it is you want in your life. And therefore you can conjure the courage to go after that. So what's your perspective on that relationship?
I love that question, because it actually brings us to the origin of the word courage, which I don't know if you know where it comes from.
I don't. Enlighten me.
So in Latin, it comes from cor, courage,
Okay.
cœur in French, corazon,
Heart.
cuore in Italian, heart. And what we often, from when we're small, we get taught to not be loyal to ourselves, not to be authentic to ourselves because of external expectations, which then eventually leads to the number one regret of the people at the point of death, which is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not a life that others expected of me. And so for me, the connection between intuition and courage is extremely strong. For me, intuition, you can speak about the gut, you can speak about the heart, but it comes from inside, right? And most of us are petrified to stand still and listen to what the intuition is telling you, because the intuition knows when we're in the wrong or a relationship that isn't serving us anymore. We know,
right?
Like the gut, the heart, the intuition knows what we have to do.
It does.
And it's scary. And it's scary to sometimes face that. And it can be the wrong, it can be professional, it can be a relationship, it can be a country, it can be, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Your intuition knows. Your intuition knows. And so to what extent can you have the courage to listen to your intuition and follow your heart, and then shed the skin and go through that often painful and very scary process
right
of following your intuition.
Right. And the transformation that comes from that, right? And it brings me to, in my book, I talk about cutting things out that no longer serve you, and how that process has to happen so that you can fit in the things that fuel you, the things that move you, the things that matter most to you, right? Because we all get 24 hours a day and no more than that. So it's not about how can we just kind of stack every habit and cram all this stuff in and make ourselves even more frantic. It's about what can we remove that doesn't have a place in our lives anymore, because maybe it drains us or depletes us, or it just is siphoning our energy and it is not adding value whatsoever. So that brings me to, yes, intuitively, if a person is no longer for you. If a job is no longer for you. If you're in an environment that no longer serves you. And because sometimes it can be scary for people to act on that. And other times they can find that courage within them to say, I'm going to make a change. What do you see with people, especially, like I would say, you work with tons of leaders, right? And in leadership environments with your keynotes and all the work that you're doing. So where do you see people really take on the actions that are necessary to cut out what no longer serves them and to move on from that? And like, how do they conjure up the courage to do so?
I would say on one side, it's when something really happens and you're in a situation where there's so much pain, and pain can be physical, it can be mental, it can be you're in a toxic work environment and you just can't anymore.
Mhm.
or you've reached a point of saturation where you need to get out of that career, or that marriage, or whatever it is. And so there's pain involved, and it gets to a point where you just go like, no more, I'm out.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I see, and it's really beautiful, I see very senior leaders, even at the CEO and founder level,
Yeah.
who see an opportunity right now in a moment of historic change and transition. They see the opportunity and the duty to leave a legacy that matters, not from the ego,
Mhm.
but truly to serve something greater than themselves, whether it's the organization that they're leading, whether it's a family business they're leading, whether it's a Fortune 500 company, the impact it can have on society,
Mhm.
on the organizational world, on the people around them.
Mhm.
And that can be a big driver as well.
Yeah.
Reflecting on the fact that you're not going to be here forever can be a very, very strong pull. Reflecting on the fact that time is finite. And I sometimes struggle with the word legacy because it can be, as there's a Buddhist teacher I love, Dr. Nikki Mugafor, and she speaks about legacy as being almost like a delusion that we carry to, to not confront the fact that we're going to die. And but you can see it as, how will I be remembered by the people I care most about?
Mhm. Right.
And
Right.
what are the traces that I can leave behind?
Yeah.
And that can be a very strong. I think that's probably the most powerful
The motivation.
motivation. Yeah,
Right.
to
Right.
take courageous action.
Yes.
Like, what is the consequence of not taking courageous action?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what if you don't? And you use the expression before, Erin, cutting off. The
Mm-hmm.
word decision
Mm-hmm.
in its Latin root comes from decidere, which literally means to cut off.
Yeah.
So what are the decisions I need to make, and what are the consequences of not making them
Mm.
in a year, 10, 20 from now?
Right. Right. Yeah. It reminds me too of dealing with a sense of mediocrity. Like, if you don't make this decision, are you just becoming complacent? And I know in experiences that I've had with many clients, and I've had them myself, having to think about, okay, am I going to be like that for the next 10 years or 20 years or 30 years? Or am I going to feel that way in that relationship or in that job or career? And making decisions from that place where it's like, but I'm no longer willing to just be complacent or to feel like I'm living in mediocrity. And so therefore, I will make a change. I see a lot of people come at it from that place, and you're so right. It's like, in hindsight, everything makes sense, right? But we don't always have hindsight. So we do have to use something like intuition and courage to make decisions now about our future, right? To make decisions that are moving us closer to that true self, that authentic self, that heart-centered way of being that isn't always acknowledged by the external world, right? It first has to be acknowledged by you, yourself. Which brings me to asking you, Julian, what are some of your rituals or your non-negotiables that you have fit into your life? Because since your health scare and all of the ways that you used to live, work hard, play hard, right? You knew that your mindset had to shift, but also your ways of being had to shift because you needed to take care of you. And so, what are some of these things you've started to incorporate into your life that you'll never give up because you know that they serve you?
Hmm. Meditation is a core one.
Yeah.
In particular, for me, Vipassana meditation has been a big game changer.
Yeah.
There's one ritual I wish I would do daily, but I'll be lying if I did. I used to. It's called priming. So it's, after meditating, is reflecting on three things I'm grateful for. These can be big things, these can be very small things, and really not just thinking about them, but really envisioning myself in them, and feeling that.
Mm.
Because there were moments in my life where things were very difficult. I mean, as with everyone who's listening to this, and just to reconnect at the emotional level with the gratitude that I feel every day.
Mhm.
And then in that same exercise, you then go into the future and you start imagining three things that I want to accomplish, and then feeling as if I've already accomplished them. But this
Mhm.
aren't necessarily just career things, because I can get very drawn into that need for accomplishment is still there and for validation. And so I intentionally put things in there that are more related to my family, to my partner, to the people I love most, so that I can help myself stay on track a bit more, because it's something
Right.
that I've always struggled with. And then the third ritual for me is once a year I do either a Vipassana retreat, and I connected with contemplation of death, which is an old practice called Maranasati Sutta.
Mhm.
So it's contemplating your own mortality.
Mhm.
This, by the way, can also be translated into daily ritual. It's asking yourself, what if this was my last breath? What if this was my last meal? And it cuts through the fluff immediately, because it
Yeah.
straight away reminds you of what's most essential.
I love this. This is like, I feel like with the book that I wrote around rituals, what you're doing is giving listeners the permission to explore other things that could be a ritual for them too, but also to make things not as scary. For some people, meditation is scary, because they've never been in stillness with their own mind. And for some people, the word intuition can be scary because they don't really know what's in their heart, right? Like maybe their heart is so guarded. I know mine used to be. It was, it had walls and blocks all around it. And then for others, a retreat could be a scary thing. And so I like talking about these things that are rituals for someone like you who has been through a lot, as you said, many of us have. And yet you find your way to these practices that really serve you and make you feel more whole as a human being. And meditation is a big one for me too. I can't really say I go every single day with a meditation, but when I don't have a meditation, I can feel this distance where I'm like, oh, am I getting further away from where I want to be in myself, right? So I crave it now, almost like water. It's really interesting how it becomes a life force, an energy giver, right?
Yes.
So you mentioned retreats, and I would love to talk to you a little bit about some of the retreats that you're planning, because you've got this business around retreats as well. So if you could share that with all of us, I've been to many retreats and I love them. There are certainly those that I don't think were done that well, but then, I look at your website and I'm like, ooh, I love what he is doing. So talk to us a little bit about how you curate your retreats.
Mm. Thank you. And you mentioned something important. It is scary. Meditation is scary.
Mhm.
Retreats are scary. Yes, yes. And then we bring it back to courage.
Exactly.
If they weren't scary, it wouldn't be a courageous act.
Yeah.
And to all those listening who say, I can't meditate because I can't sit because my mind, I have full blown ADHD. I'm on a 9 out of 10 scale. Like I'm full blown. It's hard. It's still hard after 15 years. It's hard every day. And to spend a week in silence, it's extremely scary. You've not been doing it for years. So that's one thing I wanted to point out before I delve into the retreats that we run. I wouldn't call it a business. I wouldn't call it a business, even though there's a lot of planning involved and there's an entire team. We started off 4 years ago. My co-founder had been running them for over a decade. And we came up with this idea, which then led me to me resigning, which was what happens if you brought together a group of people of like extraordinary humans that we all really admire. By extraordinary humans, I don't just mean by their CV, even though a big percentage are CEOs and you know people that are unarguably very successful, impact investors, philanthropists, and then we mix them up with scientists and authors and people that work for the Gates Foundation and people, impact entrepreneurs. People come from very different backgrounds and from their late 20s all the way to their late 70s. And what if you brought them all together, but no one was allowed to speak about what they do or what their surname is? So you keep the anonymity. And here I keep coming back because I love origin of words. The origin of the word personality comes from personale, which is a mask. And what the way it's engineered is that because of the anonymity, you are allowed to drop the mask, and it starts dropping very fast, whether you're a public figure or not. It doesn't really matter. It allows people to really speak up about their fears, and it's in a therapeutic container, so it's important to mention that. And it's 1 week. It's called Courage, and it's about engineering a life or steps that will build towards a life to minimize regrets, coming back to your point that you made earlier. And especially to minimize the number one regret, the most common one. Not to have had the authenticity in your life, to live a life that is authentic to you and not one that was expected by others, which can mean different things to different people. And it's magical. It's really, really magical. And the idea was always, once people leave and there's a 2-month integration process and container, people do start realizing who the other people are. And because they've connected at such an intimate level, as they've been reflecting on death, as they've been together in these very, very intimate therapeutic containers, in probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. And it's in a nature reserve. It's a privatized nature reserve in Colombia. So it's an outstandingly, mesmerizingly beautiful place. Once they come out, projects are launched, because the 70-year-old impact investor who used to be the CEO of one of the largest companies in the world then starts supporting the 27-year-old master student, this incredible woman who wants to change the world by creating a private equity fund around sustainability, or the women empowerment advocate from Nigeria who suddenly gets supported by an entire team of people in the group, someone that has the courage to leave a relationship or become a father, and it starts creating that network of people that support each other in their courageous steps. So,
well, that just sounds amazing. And one of the things that really struck a chord with me is that you're very intentional in curating these retreats. But you said, it's not a business, right? It's more of a community in the way that you're describing it. And I love not telling people's last names. I do this in my cohorts that I run, which are virtual. And everyone is in there. And I just say, we're not going to talk about the work that we do. We're going to talk about who we are. And at first, that can be really, really challenging for people, because we are also used to identifying by our titles, the roles that we play. And so having people, especially in that very first interaction where they're just meeting, have them define who they are without using that is not easy. But then I always make a joke, and I'm like, by the way, you guys can all go on LinkedIn later and figure out who you all are. Like, I'm sure you're going to do that anyways. So that doesn't happen here on my time, but that too takes courage, like you said, to be in a group of people where you don't know anybody and you're just supposed to be yourself, right? It's like, wait a minute, like, who am I without all of this? So what, with that said, what would you want people to know from your perspective about either intention or gratitude or courage, some of these themes that we have talked about today?
I really believe that we are the architects of what we build next. I think this is extremely relevant in today's world and in that intersection that we're in. It's important for any leader at any level, no matter if you're CEO or at middle management or just starting off. You are the architect of what will be built next.
Yes.
And those who will thrive in that future and those who will shape that future, whatever that is, are the ones that had the courage not to hesitate.
100.
But there's also another thing which connects to something I said earlier, which I think is almost more important, because we're also the architects of what we leave behind. And I truly believe courage is not just going to make the difference in a competitive advantage way, when we're leading and building organization and businesses. But it's a defining factor of what we're going to leave behind. And so, in essence, the more courage you have, the more your life will expand.
Wow. That's so powerful. Thank you. Now, before we go, and I ask you to share with everybody where they can learn more about your work and your retreats, what would you like to tell us about your documentary? Because I believe I heard this correctly at one point not long ago that you have recently opened up for crowdfunding. So can you just tell us a little bit about what's going on with this?
Yeah, and for context, this is one of the projects that was born from one of the retreats where some of us came together, primarily my creative partner, Juan Herrero, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer who spent years with National Geographic in conflict zones, and who then became a filmmaker, an incredible artist. Along with an incredible team of people, we started traveling around the planet to find and then learn from some of the bravest people in the world. Mm-hmm. From war zones to spend a lot of time in maximum security prisons, but we also spent time with, what we define as visionary CEOs and entrepreneurs and high performance athletes and women empowerment advocates, and the list goes on and on and on. To get to what is the anatomy of courage, like what can we learn from that, and bring these stories of people that have transformed incredible adversity and pain into courage and into meaning, and make those individuals lighthouses of courage, and make people, make the audience realize that they've been courageous many times before. You don't have to have committed a heroic act to be a hero, and to have been courageous. So that's how it started. And beyond the initial financing, we were like, what if we could turn this into a community beyond just creating content? And I'm very fortunate because one of our producers, he is the person who has worked as an impact producer, but also community builder for people like Joaquin Phoenix and Leonardo DiCaprio and Mr. Beast. And his entire work is around how do you create not just something that looks beautiful and that can move people, but how can you go beyond that? How can you create impact, and how can you build community around the content that you're building? And that's where we felt that crowdfunding could be an important part of that. We're going to be launching the campaign next year. But yeah, at the core, it's how do you make this into a journey where I'm not just the one traveling and interviewing people, and it's not just me and the team, but it's me and all the people that decide to be part of this journey as we film, as we find these incredible humans. And
sounds so exciting. It's very exciting, and it's
Thank you.
So purposeful, right? I mean, it's not just aligned with your purpose, but human purpose in general. So I think it's very exciting, and I'd love for people to be able to learn more about when that crowdfunding does launch. Where can they go to learn more and potentially be a part of this?
So we'll be launching it on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter team has been amazing in supporting us throughout the launch, which is very exciting. And I'd say for now, if you want to check out my website or my Instagram, it's both Julian Pistone, one is .com. On Instagram, you'll just find me on Julian Pistone.
Right.
And then as it launches, yeah, and then I guess through your community, and people are going to connect more with you in your community.
Right.
I'm sure there's ways that we can divulge that.
Yeah.
And
so in the meantime, we'll be sharing all of your social links so people can follow along. And then, yes, I'm sure you will be talking about all the things that you're going to be doing around the crowdfunding, your retreats, and all this exciting stuff you have going on. Julian, is there any other wisdom?
Life is really short. And the time for courageous leadership is really now. I truly believe that in my core. And that can be in politics, that can be in the business world, but that can also be in your family. And so my very simple, I don't know if it's even wisdom, but my call to action would be like, don't wait. Like, don't wait. And what is it that And that's a question that I ask myself the whole time because I keep getting distracted with things that aren't essential, mostly work related. But what's the one thing that you've been putting off?
Mm.
And is there something that you've been putting off that you can act upon immediately after having listened to this? And it doesn't have to be something huge. It can be that email, that apology, that text message to a friend that you know needs to hear your words right now. What's the one courageous thing that you've been hesitating in putting off that you can do right now as you finish listening to this? And realizing that too was courageous.
Right. Don't wait. That is so beautiful. Thanks for imparting that wisdom as we close up this episode. That was beautiful. And you've been just such a joy to talk to, as I knew you would be. So thank you for joining me on the show.
Erin, thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much. And I can't wait to have this conversation deeper and longer. And
yes.
yeah, your community is very lucky to have you as a role model for courage. I mean, you're someone who've had an extremely successful career and took the decision to cut off and focus on the things that mattered most to you and to what was more meaningful to you, to live a life that is more authentic to you.
Yeah.
And I know the impact that's had on the people close to you, on your family, but also on the community that you've built
Yeah.
as a role model of bravery and of authenticity. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've been very lucky to have this conversation, and the people listening to
Yeah.
you on a daily basis and working with you are also very lucky.
Thank you. Well, the pleasure is mine. Thank you so much. And everyone, you know what to do. Please like, share, leave a rating or review so that this show reaches more and more people who need to hear it. And until next time, be well.